Okay. And first of all, welcome, Mr. Kassapis. Thank you for being with us today. And this is a BNCY interview as part of the Historical Dialogues first event of the year. Historical Dialogue is a team of the Bicommunal network of Cypriot youth. And we are young people who organize discussion and other events around history, modern history of Cyprus. And we will involve some experts in our next events, but for now we want to interview ordinary people who are not experts in the field of history, just have lived through and experienced some of the events in our modern history after, let's say, the 70s and onwards, for example. Now, first of all, I would like, would you like to introduce yourself, maybe your age, where you're from, village, town, and so that the audience can know a bit more about you?
Okay, George, I'm Joseph Kassapis. I come from the Maronite community, Kormakitis in particular, the biggest of only 4 villages today comprising the community. I'm 63 years old. I am married to a Greek Cypriot lady. I have 3 children who are all, 2 graduated from the United Kingdom and are currently in Cyprus, just got their first jobs. My daughter still finishing this year her degree in Glasgow. They are Maronite. So yes. I am extremely active in the Greek Cypriot community, like all Maronite Cypriots. Just to say very quickly that our 4 villages are in the north, and as a result, we are completely dispersed, 5 to 6,000 of us. Okay, maybe I said more than I should, anticipating future questions, but all right, this is me.
Yes, no, thank you. That's great, because anyway, I mean, the next questions are just open-ended, and they will lead on to more discussion, and we will just elaborate. So yeah, now since you were born in the mid-60s, right? If I understood, 60s.
58, 1958.
Sorry, 50s. Yeah, you're 60. Yeah, okay.
63 years.
Yeah, 63 years old. Yes. So late 50s. Would you like to tell us how you and your community in Kormakitis village, how you experienced what you can remember from the events of the 1960s, for example, where there was particularly intercommunal violence between obviously the 2 largest communities, Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots, but it affected everyone, and that's a fact. And obviously the Turkish Cypriots disproportionately at that time, as we know. But yeah, just you know, this is an open-ended question. Just go through, talk us through what you remember, what you can recall.
Okay, it's a very complex answer, George. It was a very complex situation, actually. Lots of different strands emotional in our minds, some of which may appear conflicting to you, but this was the flavor of the times. Next to my village was a pure Greek Cypriot village, even closer to the sea. The Cape of Kormakitis is called than us, and even closer than they, but towards the western coast now, not on the tip of the Cape, was a mixed village, Aya Irini, Turkish and Greek Cypriot. So we were impacted by both in different ways. Generally, I remember my childhood being a very happy childhood, but with one terrified component always there, which was this, the way adults were describing the situation with the conflicts, the fasarias as we call them, the conflict. There was although the villagers had terrific relations with the Turkish Cypriots via Irini, terrific, brotherly. And the Greek Cypriots of the two nearby villages, the mixed one, Irini, and the pure Greek one at Livera. There was always a tremendous fear of the Turks, which was inculcated in us by the prevailing atmosphere, which was obviously what we were exposed to, the media, the Greek Cypriot media, and then. Personally, for some strange reason, I don't recall seeing Turkish Cypriots. Of course, in 63, I was only 5, except when they came and worked as workers when our elementary school was being built. That's my first experience of Turkish Cypriots, although they always had extremely cordial relations with my fellow villagers, and they were quite mixed. Now, there was this, on one hand, the terror and fear of Turks, not Turkish Cypriots, but Turks. Always this fear they were going to come one day and get us. At the same time, there was this tremendous abhorrence from us at the stories we were hearing of neighborhood killings of Turkish Cypriots in the area. I remember how hearing the adults discuss, like behind closed doors, how, I don't know if I'm overdoing it here, but I'm telling you sincerely how my reminiscing goes.
Yes.
How a family of Turkish Cypriots who was extremely popular in the village of shepherds was annihilated in one night in the woods, maybe 2-3 kilometers from our village, by known people from this other village, the pure Greek Cypriot village on the Cape. I remember how, so I was, on one hand, we were terrified as kids from the vague and abstract fear of the Turks, and on the other, of Turkey, from Turkey, and on the other hand, we were witnessing around us the killings of very, very loved individuals by known, strong unknown killers, also of the area. So it was a very composite situation. Obviously, we felt Maronites. We were isolated at the time. 4 villages, especially Kormakitis, was extremely isolated. Even another Maronite married at the village was referred to by the name, let's say, Asomatidis. He comes from Asomatos, although he was Maronite. 63, there was this huge cloud of fear in what continued to be very happy times, generally, childhood times. But there was this big cloud of fear, the Fasaries. I remember always aunts coming from Nicosia and discussing with my parents as we were sitting and watching the TV, just when TV appeared, or these stories of killings, always described with this very, very, very terrifying tones for us kids. We had a family adventure also in 63. There was right in the middle of the troubles, my father, who was one of the few who had a car in Kormakitis, actually he drove an uncle was coming from England for the summer for holidays. He was studying in England, and he drove to the airport with 2 much younger, he must have been 25 at the time, 2 younger cousins of my mother's, and they passed from the mixed village Skilura on the way to the airport. And it happened that at that time there was shooting across the street by the Turkish Cypriots on one side of the street and the Greek Cypriots on the other side of the street. So we were in church at the time. I remember very clearly, maybe I was, 63, 5 years old. And this cry came that they shot teacher Elias. My father was called Elias, and he was a teacher by profession. So initially, the information sort of alluded or made us understand that he was killed. He was shot at. Eventually, the next day, I remember there was all this big outcry, my mother running from the church and so on. We went to my grandmother's and slept there for the night. And the next day we learned that he wasn't killed. They were not killed. They were shot. The car was it was turned over, hit some fence in the middle of the village of Skilura. They went out, they ran while being shot at, and they reached Agios Vasilis, where there was Greek Cypriots who had just expelled the Turkish Cypriots of Agios Vasilis, who had come to Skilura, and it was a very messy situation. So they just escaped killing. Just to tell you how interesting this got later, my father was narrating this story to a Turkish Cypriot. My father was fond of everybody, especially Turkish Cypriots. He was narrating this story in some village in the north, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And the person who was in the audience said at the time, "Teacher, you are very lucky. You know what happened and you escaped? It was me shooting, and the weapon, I don't know what the English word is, sort of didn't work. So you were very lucky." I remember I was there, I was the one shooting. So this is a very interesting story. Until recently, we were looking at the fence where the car had hit, and it was still like bent over and so on. The car, riddled with bullets, stayed for years parked outside my grandmother's house. It belonged to my uncle. And so this was another like shadow, which like shadowed our childhood. Other than that, as we grew up, we continued to have this terror of Turkey coming, because we were seaside too, very near. We were said to be the village nearest to Turkey of all, actually. Kormakitis could well be, and there was this like stories, rumors, or like a myth that you could hear the cocks if you swam a little further, the good swimmers swam further out from the coast. So this feeling of terror of Turkey coming and getting us continued until 1974. Of course, we grew up by then. We began to know much better the Greek Cypriot nationalists, and began to form political views. And that was the situation, more or less, until the coup. Like a mixed sympathy for Turkish Cypriots, great sympathy for Turkish Cypriots, great mingling with Greek Cypriot circles too, including some not very nice ones by some enthusiastic villagers who wanted to be accepted, and they had this natural pressure and tendency to be accepted, okay, and ended up behaving like in a very nationalistic, Greek nationalistic way. Very, very strange situation. Very small community, obviously very weak and very feeble, obsessed with survival, and fearing everybody, basically. Extremely cordial relations with Turkish Cypriots, including after the war. So maybe I said more than I should at this stage. That was the situation, very mixed.
Yes, no, thank you. That was great, because it gave us a real in-depth insight. And no, nothing is more than enough. This is perfect. I mean, yeah, that's very fascinating to see how your community, the Maronites, were obviously, as Greek Cypriots, I imagine, were terrorized with this fear, abstract fear of Turkey invading, of Turkey, let's say, you know. But then they saw the violence of, you know, peers in the Greek Cypriot community, for example, in the 1963 events, with the violent events against the Turkish Cypriots. They saw that. Then it was more on a more practical, and no, it was more on a more practical level. It wasn't something abstract. You met with violence and with all this terror. It came home. They came.
Absolutely right. Yeah. You put it very well. We were getting this general information from Nicosia and overall Cyprus through relatives who were visiting.
Yes.
And it was always this mixed scene of Greeks and Turks fighting, but we were like with the Greeks. We were like, it's the Turkish danger there, the Turks like doing things. And yet in the local area, we had this, the situation was of a very feeble Turkish Cypriot, very peaceful and vulnerable community, very close to us, who were really subjected to tremendous pressure. So it was this mixed picture, the general abstract coming from outside through reports from media and the relatives who lived in Nicosia, and we are more exposed to media, and the local scene where the Turkish Cypriot, were getting, unfortunately, they were on the receiving end of it exclusively, because there was no possibility for them to do anything.
Yes, of course, and yeah, that highlights the fact that it was more than just an obscene event. It was experienced by you firsthand. Obviously, you know, knowing someone who, or passing by a zone where there was gunfire. You know, it is quite firsthand, and it's quite on a more practical level, and more something no one would want to experience. And let's just welcome Turhan to our discussion. Hi, Turhan.
Hello,
hi.
Would you like to introduce yourself, Turhan, just to Mr.
Joseph? Sure. Well, I am Turhan. I am from the north side, the Turkish side. Currently, I am in the UK. I study politics and international studies at the University of Warwick. We are
my nephew is there, Turhan.
Sorry?
You probably met my nephew.
Yeah, Alex.
Yes, my favorite nephew.
Yeah, but he is third year.
Ah, yes. You are first year. Sorry, I interrupt. You go on.
Yeah. So I am so happy to meet with you as a person, because we should know that there are many communities in Cyprus, like Turkish Cypriots, Greek Cypriots, and Maronites, as well as Latins. When we consider Maronite community, their population is decreasing, especially in the Kormakitis. So their culture experience some sort of erosion by the other cultures. Therefore, I would like to ask, what should be done in order to encourage young Maronites from the Greek side to migrate to the Kormakitis? Because the Maronite community in Kormakitis is a very cultural community, and their population is decreasing because it is mainly old people who stay in Kormakitis. So I would like to ask, what can be done in order to support the Maronite community in the Kormakitis?
That's a very good question, which takes me from those days, Turkan, when I never doubted that the Maronite community would survive, because we were in 4 closely knit villages and most marriages were amongst ourselves. It brings me to now, when I'm free from the terror of Turkey finally, because I experienced it and it wasn't that terrifying, although I'm not very happy with what happened. But I am informing you, my dear friends, that you are talking to a 63-year-old who is convinced, for very objective reasons, that my community is dying. Now, we Maronites stand and look at Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots saying that the red lines, what must never happen, and it's inconceivable, it's their communities disappearing. Ours is absolutely guaranteed to disappear, being assimilated very fast, displaced from its 4 houses. And you touched the very raw point here. Unless we return, we are finished very, very soon. Demographically, I would say 18 out of 20 marriages are with Greek Cypriots. And in 17 out of 18 of those marriages, the children become Greek Cypriot under the tremendous pressure that comes from the demographic realities and from the, in my view, very, very aggressive projection of Greek identity over other identities, which makes my very few fellow Maronites so timid and so likely to become accepted, to not resist at all getting assimilated. So now you asked me how, and I answered you a different question. Must they? Yes, they must. If they don't, we are finished, I estimate, within 50 years as a functioning community. How can we? Listen, I turn around now and the sun has set, and I see the end of Pentadactylos, the mountain, and my village lies there. It's 35 minutes from here if I drove freely. This is a small country. I can stretch my arm and I can reach it. I cannot. This is absolutely unacceptable in Europe of 2021. My mother has been there. She's 86. My father died 6 months ago after waiting for 50 years for a change. He was the local teacher, a very influential man. My mother has to suffer his going alone. We have not been able to see her for many, many months, and we are not going to be able to see her. Any moment now she could go. She's one of maybe 20, let's say 30 to 45 of the original people enclaved. How can we, look, the only way that we can go is if we have rights, opportunities, if we have access, and if we have communication, if we have free, basic human rights. Let me tell you a story. We were 5. We were, and you will see why we are so few there. The first 5 years, my parents lost 4 of their children instantly in one day when the Turkish army occupied the village, and we all left, except for the smaller one of us, who was a child yet, not even to school. We all went to England. I stayed 1 year and my sister in Nicosia as refugees. And the next year, we also went to England, joining our other 2 brothers. Our parents couldn't have any communication with us except by letter through Mersin, Turkey, for years. They didn't have access to a phone. There was one time when there was absolute emergency. My father needed to reach us in England. He went to an English, like small colony in a forest near the village, and he asked if he could use the phone. The answer was no, get out of here, you are placing us in danger and so on. And this is an Anglophone speaking. I'm a great fan of England, etc., etc. He went back home, unable to speak to his children. For many, many years, we had 0 rights, not even a phone, extremely restricted access. We had to apply, pay, etc., etc. Over the years, it varied. It became more free, less free, more free, less free. It was impossible for people, young people, to go there and stay for the simple reason of schools, of commuting to work, etc., etc. We need to go. It's a humanitarian thing. If you are sorry for a plant getting lost, imagine for a community of 1,500 years at least in Cyprus, fellow Cypriots. The only way we can go is at least free commuting, which is so little to ask. We are still considered foreigners in our own village, okay? Still considered foreigners. We are still on visas like foreign ministry. We are under the foreign ministry, people. I am a great, great, great friend of Turkish Cypriots, but I must say that I consider our treatment unacceptable. Unacceptable. I'm a great enemy of Greek Cypriot nationalism that I consider primarily responsible for what happened. Obviously, I hold Turkey responsible for a lot too, a lot. But believe me, Turhan, the Maronite community took the brunt 100 times more than any other community, for the simple reason that it is now extinct, almost extinct. My children will never be Maronites like I was, my nephew, Alex, and so on and so on and so on, for the simple reason that they are lost in a million others, okay, and under tremendous pressure to assimilate. So rights, my friend, we need rights. It's not some kind of antipathy towards Turkish Cypriots. On the absolute contrary, if you ask around in the area of the village what the relations were with Kormakitis people of local Turkish Cypriots, including during the coup, and they protected so many, they hit people, they fed them, you will see that this doesn't exist at all, especially after the war, when we lost that engraved in us fear of Turks that was put by media and so on and so on. I was absolutely convinced at 16 that when the Turks came in the invasion, they were going to slaughter us. Even I, an absolutely left-leaning, extremely anti-Greek Cypriot nationalist, I was convinced they were going to slaughter us from all that indoctrination at school and then. Yet I got rid of all of it, but here I am now, absolutely neutral and Cyprus-loving, wanting my community to survive. Appeal to you young guys, show interest in this community because it is disappearing. Yes. Rights, we want simple rights, access, be able to commute, come here, work. Rights like Turkish Cypriots there.
Yes, fair enough. I mean, that's very reasonable, and that's the basic aspect which should be addressed, and it is a reality that your community faces, because even I know I have friends who are Maronites, but obviously they've assimilated, they've integrated so much with the Greek Cypriot community that they're just, I mean, people would refer to them as Greek Cypriots in everyday talk, you know,
for many purposes.
Yeah, for many purposes. I mean, this is the reality. I'm not saying this is.
No.
Yeah. This is what's happening, and it's just it really struck me now. Yeah, that how that's happening, and your community is being endangered towards extinction, basically. Yeah, exactly. And so that was a very useful sort of parenthesis there. A little from Turhan. We can go back to our discussion and just another question I have for Mr. Kassapis. And that is, you also touched upon, obviously, we started from the 60s, especially 63, where it was the real, sorry?
The Troubles.
Yes, the Troubles and the culmination of the whole Troubles and the violent events of 63 onwards. But and then you talked about the coup, but let's dive into exactly how you experienced the 70s and just before the invasion, and maybe and then during the aftermath of the invasion, and those times. We're moving on to a decade on now, and just as you had described to us the events of the 60s, maybe you can talk us through what your experiences are from the events in the 70s.
Okay, so we finished elementary school in Kormakitis, so still we were very shielded from the rest of the world. As you said, 63, it was when reality sunk in. I mean, and the incident I told you, we were in church with our mother, and there was this outcry. Teacher Kassapis was shot, and shot meant killed, although it was later disproven. So reality dawned on us that things were bad. Turkish Cypriots tended to disappear even more from sight now after that. Well, maybe 71 was it, 58 when I was 12, 70, I went to secondary school. So I experienced Nicosia for the first time in a real way, other than occasional stays with uncles and aunts who were staying in Nicosia during the summer holidays. So I go to this school. Until then, I could say that more or less I felt a Greek, and in some ways more Greek than Greeks. I remember, for example, that every morning I would tune in to the radio, knew what every Greek athlete or every football player in Greece had eaten for breakfast. I knew every record that Greek athletes had been scoring in obscure meetings, Balkan games, and so on and so on. And yet at the same time, I was very aware that I was a Maronite, but my education was completely Greek. I felt Socrates and Plato and all these people were really my ancestors. So that was the whole, like again, this antithesis. I go to secondary school considering I'm a Greek, I'm an ancestor, I'm a descendant of Socrates and so on, that Greek is my heritage and so on. And at the same time, knowing very well and being that I'm a Maronite, and loving very much my community and feeling extremely positively towards Turkish Cypriots, other than this general phobia of the Turks, the abstract. Meaning, basically, if you hammered it into shape, Turkey will come and get us. Anyway, so I go to school. There I experience very quickly isolation in class, in that everything I heard made me feel that it was me and the rest. It was everything I heard about me, which was rare, about my community, about Catholics, was hostile, everything. It was always, it was the greatness of Greeks. And suddenly I began to become conscious that I wasn't really a Greek. I was a Greek educated, Greek loving and culture person, but I wasn't a Greek. And my fair side, my rational side, I began to mature in the meantime, began to question things and began to resent what I was hearing. Obviously, it was junta times, and nationalism was paroxysmic at school. The books were terrible. So gradually I was maturing into what it means to be Greek, like cultured from the ancient Greek point of view, and what it meant to be a Greek nationalist, a Cypriot Greek nationalist. Gradually I became aware of these Eokavita situations and so on. I became a fanatical Magarios supporter, not because I so much because I admired Magarios, because I hated the other side who were so chauvinistic. And it was very tense at schools. It began to become by 72. We were absolutely cut in the middle, 50-50. 50%, the much more combative side, much more I hated that combative culture of the extreme nationalists who were Grivas supporters. We were very much like the Magarios supporters, who were basically two parts, the Agel supporters and people like me who were quite anti-communist, leftist leaning, maybe leftist leaning, but quite anti-communist, but absolutely anti-nationalistic. So it carried on becoming tenser and tenser. There was daily demonstrations. The students were leaving. The Griva supporting 50% was always causing trouble in the school. There was fighting, there was shouting, there was... and then the coup came. And everything changed completely. So obviously I was extremely ideological by that time and politically minded, extremely anti-nationalism, anti-Grivas, anti-Eokavita and so on. I was 16 at the time. There was this tense several days. People came to the village, all sorts of unofficial militia, and put people against walls and began threatening and where is the weapons and so on and so on. Quickly, a few Turkish Cypriots, very beloved in the area, shepherds, very well known in the village, disappeared. There was all sorts of rumors about who did it. Even people from our village were associated, who were trying to impress the Eokavita nationalists who were roaming the area. Terrifying air in the village. Terrified air. Didn't last for long. The invasion happened. I will give you a taste of where I was at the time. It was a very hot night, and I was always sleeping with my youngest brother at that time. I was 16, he was 8, and we went to the, we had a smaller house adjoining the main one, and through our parents' bedroom window, we climbed up there on the terrace, and I climbed and wanted to sleep there because it was extremely hot. My younger brother followed me, and we were counting stars as they were disappearing one by one as the dawn was coming. Suddenly, bam, boom, planes, bam, boom, bam, boom. Window slams open. My father, radio, invasion. Within a couple of hours, there was almost even a feeling of mixed feelings, terror and excitement. Still at 16, I was quite influenced by all that big talk of Greece and Greek soul and nature and being able to fight everything and the heroes and so on. So with a brother and the 2 cousins, we went to the fields, awaiting the Greek planes to come and prove what we always heard, that one Greek pilot was worth 20. Even I, with all my anti-social chauvinism, all my anti-Greek nationalism, it was so ingrained deeply in me that I was waiting for this. Okay, finally the Turks came, and now the Greeks would show them. This was the initial feeling. Soon we had dead in the village. We had, not through bombardment, there was all sorts of weird incidents, shootings by mistake, and the reality dawned. There was not going to be any planes. The lies started. The the radio was hailing, still run by Eokavita people, hailing the continuous shooting down of the Turkish airplanes, all lies, and the fantastic moves of the Greek army, and so on and so on and so on. I forgot to say that before the invasion, every night we were sitting in front of the TV, and I had the ordeal of watching Samson and his ministers, dictating and showing us all this evidence and proof of Makarios' barbaric whatever, this and that, and subjecting us to indoctrination and so on and so on for 7 days. How many days did he last? So in a sense, I must say that again, it was composite. There was relief that Samson and these idiots would go. There was terror, what Turkey was going to do to us. Immediately we began imagining, I was continually thinking that I was hearing helicopters and tanks marching from the sea towards the village, because it was always said to us as children that they were going to come, they were going to invade. It was so near Turkey, and they were going to slaughter us all. All sorts of rumors started circulating in the village that there was drops from by parachute from planes on Pentadactylos in the nearby area of machetes and big knives. And even I, at 16, a very rational and a very good student, I was, by the way, in the class. It was a funny situation because I was not the only non-Greek, the one who wasn't Greek and couldn't share in all that pride and so on and so on. But I spoke by far the best Greek, and I happened to be the best student. I'm not saying it because it was a funny situation, so I could take care of myself. But other Maronite students in the same school who didn't have because Maronites spoke Arabic normally until they went to elementary school. Or I, only because my mother didn't speak Arabic, because he came from another Maronite village where they didn't speak Arabic. Only in Kormakitis they spoke Arabic. So I had this privilege of being able more comfortable in Greek. So the other Maronites in other classes, they were treated very well, I must be fair, but when it came to this national thing, they were really given a very hard time and they couldn't take care of themselves. I could, because I had the aura of a good student. Anyway, soon all this, the strand of excitement went, and there was only terror and horror. At some point, I remember myself with another two cousins diving under a car, convinced that an aeroplane which was bombarding the area was coming at us. It was diving. I was absolutely convinced I could see the pilot, and I saw the missile leaving the plane. I was absolutely convinced it was coming at us. It wasn't actually, but it was coming at us. And then I was convinced, until today, I swear, I don't know how it happened, that I could see the dust rising 100 meters from us. Eventually, it was about a kilometer from us. And he had spotted a tractor somewhere with something suspicious, and he had struck it, but we were absolutely sure it was at us. The next 5 or 6 hours, guys, we were moving from carob tree to carob tree as the planes were circling, coming again and again. And as the plane was leaving us, we were moving to another tree. And as it was coming towards us again, we were climbing at another tree and hanging from the trunks and the big branches for 5 or 6 hours until it was dark to risk going home. This carried on throughout the fighting. There was some people killed in various ways. None direct from bombarding, but also couple in battle, bombardment. 1 or 2 got caught in the big procession outside Kontemenos, where this big procession of military convoy and civilian cars behind them were bombed, and 2 or 3 from my village died there too. And obviously horror came in fully within 1 or 2 days. Okay, anyway, at one point there was very strong rumors that they were coming, invading, and we left the village. I remember pleading my parents, please, let's go. I was so terrified. Again, believing rumors that there was like drops of parachutes full of machetes with which they're going to get us. We left the village en masse. We went to stay in a nearby Maronite village, the Maronite representative in parliament. We all slept there. The next day, there was the, what do you call it, the ceasefire. And we were driving, we all drove back. And I remember as we were driving back, the planes diving again. And there was bombing. And we were, 1 or 2 of us just escaped. Not our car, but another car. Anyway, we go back. After some days, the Turkish army appeared. Again, we were so terrified. They appeared from the wrong side. We were expecting them to come from the east, but they came from southwest through Morfu to encircle the whole area. At one point, we thought it was Greeks, and there was like, oh, Greeks are coming to save us. And then we realized it was Turkish tanks. They came, they surrounded the village. They called for the priest and the teacher. The teacher was my father, to go. And they said that they told us various things. They didn't. That was the day I lost my fear of the Turks, because I was absolutely convinced they were going to slaughter us. Within an hour, I was by the cafes where some officers had gathered and were speaking to the priest and so on. And once close to them, and I was close to some tanks who had surrounded the village, I finally realized they were not necessarily going to slaughter us. Until then, I was sure they was going to slaughter us. I realized they were human beings. Yes, I wasn't at all happy with what they had done, but they were human beings, subject to orders and subject to strategies, and perhaps they didn't have any interest in slaughtering us, and that's exactly what happened. Of course, yes. It was a very tough time even later, but nobody was slaughtered. We had an incident, again, which made reality sink in us, even worse this time. There was some Greek Cypriot people who stayed in the village to be protected instead of the nearby Greek village. 90% left, but the few who stayed came to the Maronite village, stayed with Maronites, hoping for protection. And we took them in our houses and were looking after them, just like we did with the Turkish Cypriots at the time of the coup before the invasion. We were feeding them in secret places, hidings, and so on. I don't remember now how long it was, but at some point they came, and there was 3 people left, and there was a team of Turkish Cypriots and Turkish army, and they took them together with one of the village of our villages. They took them away, and at one point, I wasn't on the spot, but other people told me at one point it seemed like they're going to execute them on the spot. And the Mukhtar pleaded with them, please, not in the village, not in the village, not in the village. And they took them away. And after a couple of hours, the Maronite came back because he was recognized by a Turkish Cypriot whom he had helped before and saved at the last moment. And the other 3 Greek Cypriots never came back. And we know that they were shot. Now, this was in reprisal for the killings I referred to in the 60s, which were very well known in the area. That was possibly the most terrible moment of all, when we realized that those people, 2 of them were very nice, innocent people, at least 2. The other one, things were said about him. Let me quickly take you now a few months, it was August, September, October, school started. We were all those, maybe 1 month later, there were lots of people who were ready to go to the army and didn't make it days before the invasion happened. And they wanted desperately to leave and go to England to study. I had one brother and many, many cousins. At one point, there was no commuting at all with the other side. The village was completely enclaved and closed. At one point, the breakthrough came and they allowed people who wanted to leave for overseas. England, a huge wave of people wanted to go for overseas. The village had 1,500 people before the invasion, before the war. About 1,000 had stayed in the village. So I remember we were in our orchard 2 kilometers from the village, picking potatoes with my grandfather, father, mother, and my older brother who wanted to go to England was picking olives with my grandmother a few kilometers further away in some area that I roughly knew where he was. At some point, my mother was at the village. She appeared on foot shouting, Joseph, 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 the bus will leave for Nicosia with those people who will go to England. Go find your brother and tell him he will miss the bus. I never ran like this in my life. Several kilometers without stopping, shouting, Antonis, Antonis, Antonis. I luckily located him. He was at the top of our olive tree. He jumped down. My mother was wondering what the hell was going on. I said, run, bus leaving in half an hour. I climbed in his place on the top of the olive tree, continued. My grandmother was asking what was going on. I would try to explain, she couldn't understand. So, and then my brother returned 4 or 5 years later. I left 2-3 months later. The people who did not intend to go to England yet, we went to the other side to join about 1 month late the secondary school. I remember a cousin being greeted. This is very important, George. A cousin being greeted with the following. you are the ones who greeted the Turks when they came. The reality was that we were absolutely petrified, unjustified fear even, that we are going to be slaughtered, all huddled in groups of 50s and 100s in houses. And they said that they saw us by telescope from Troodos mountain, welcoming with flags and open arms the Turkish troops. Yes, and that was a way to greet a 14-year-old kid who had passed through all this period, this traumatic period, into his class in front of 40 peers. I'm trying to tell you, like, although we were treated very well in some ways, when it came to the national issue, it was barbaric. Anyway, I spent a year and the next sleeping on floors of, and my sister too, sleeping on floors of 2 aunties. And we left the next year and we joined our other brothers and sisters in England. This was a typical story of teenagers at that time, okay? 16, 17, 18. So a couple of months acclaimed in the village. Then a big wave went to England, hundreds and hundreds. The rest of us who were 16, 17 went and stayed with uncles and aunts in Nicosia for a year. Those who could afford, in inverted commas, to go to England went, and others to Athens, and so on and so on.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
That was the general idea.
Yes. Yeah, that's very insightful and in-depth description of the whole experience in the 70s, leading up to the invasion and after the coup, those days and those weeks were very vivid in anyone's memory who had experienced those times. And yes, I think we have to call it a day and end the meeting soon because Zoom will not allow us for any longer. And I think our discussion has been quite productive and sufficient for today. Yeah, I would like to once again thank Mr. Kassapis, and it was a great pleasure to have you today. And everything you described to us was quite revealing and quite. We needed this first-hand description of the events and of personal stories, which are all add up to history, which is never really taught in the mainstream, either in schools or in the media, let's say, or even in what goes around in the public. These stories remain more personal, but they say they have a deeper meaning, which is very, I think, is very significant to everyone for them to hear this, especially the incident you told us now in the classroom after you had fled, and you obviously heard that from one of your new classmates, and yeah, even events from before, and they're all very significant, not just on a personal level, but I think on a more general and societal level, because yeah, I think this was experienced by not only you but many others who would like their stories to be shared, and it's very important. Yeah. And once again, yes, thank you very much, and I think we'll call it a day, and bye for now.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Turhan. Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
Good luck with your mission.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.